Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is noteworthy for at least a couple of reasons. For one thing, it's the first Final Fantasy game to appear on a Nintendo platform in many years. For another thing, it's the long-anticipated follow-up to the classic 1997 PlayStation strategy RPG. However, the game really isn't a sequel or a remake to the original Final Fantasy Tactics. The name of Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is actually a bit misleading. This is a similar game. It's in the same vein, but it's got a whole new story, a whole new cast of characters. The gameplay itself is quite different in ways that will be noticeable to fans of the previous game, and generally it's not going to go down as the same sort of classic as the original Final Fantasy Tactics did, but it's still a great game. It still features dozens of hours worth of fun-filled kind of strategic tactical battles, and it's got colorful graphics and likable character designs and all kinds of stuff that you'd hope for from a good portable RPG. The story of the game isn't really one of its strong suits. That's mostly because it doesn't figure too prominently into the game at all. Most of the time spent playing Final Fantasy Tactics Advances engaged in these turn-based tactical battles rather than watching the story unfold, kind of for better or for worse, but what story there is kind of suitable for all ages. It's clearly inspired by the Never-Ending Story in that it focuses on a couple of down-on-their-luck kids who are kind of obviously not having a good time in their formative years. They're bullied on and things like that. But one day they find a magical book, and they open it up, and it transforms their mundane and harsh world into a fantasy world in which they can be heroes. The main character of the game is Marsh, and even though he's now kind of this heroic character who's capable of swinging a sword and doing all kinds of things that he couldn't do in the real world, he's still trying to find a way back home. So early on he joins forces with this Moogle named Mont Blanc, who befriends him and kind of shows him the ropes, and the two of them set off on this long quest. That quest involves engaging in a lot of kind of 6-on-6 turn-based battles where you'll have your own group of forces and you'll be taking turns with the enemy forces, moving around, attacking, using spells and other special abilities, using items on occasion, basically doing whatever it takes to win. There are a variety of different character classes available, much like in the original Final Fantasy Tactics or in most strategy RPGs. These classes become available as you master skills of other classes. So, for example, if you master some of the white mages and the black mages' spells, then the time mage becomes available, that sort of thing. Building up your characters is at once one of the most addictive and one of the most entertaining aspects of the game, but also one of the aspects that can be a little tedious. Basically, the way it works is you master characters' abilities by equipping them with certain items and then winning a series of battles so that they gain enough ability points to memorize that skill. So different swords, different shields, things like that, each have these inherent traits that certain character classes can master, and only after these characters use these items long enough will they learn these things, and then they can equip new items and learn those new skills and so forth. So if this aspect of the game sounds a little convoluted, that's because it is. As you'd probably hope, the gameplay can be pretty strategic. The computer artificial intelligence does a pretty good job of moving its own forces around and taking advantage of any weaknesses you have. You yourself have to take into account the initiative of the various characters on the battlefield, so that means it's not just all your guys get to go and then all the bad guys get to go. It's the fastest character moves first. Though on the other hand, one aspect of the game that's missing that was really good about the original Final Fantasy Tactics was that in that game certain abilities had casting times, so if you try to wipe out the enemies with a really powerful spell, that spell will take a few turns to execute, so the enemies would get to scatter or something like that. Here, every action is executed within the character's turn, so that makes spellcasters become really, really powerful late in the game. Even so, the battles in the game can get somewhat repetitive after a while, especially once you pretty much max out your characters and find all the character classes and master all the skills that you want, but in getting there, you'll have spent many hours building up your party, that sort of thing. So this is definitely a long-lasting game. There's even a multiplayer mode for good measure, and while it doesn't quite stack up to the legacy of the original Final Fantasy Tactics, it's definitely a great strategy RPG in its own right, and is very easy to recommend to fans of games like Tactics Ogre or even the Advance Wars games. So if you've been looking forward to it, by all means check it out.